Pleasure to be with you today. So I'm the Executive Director of Partnerships for Development here at the Royal Scientific Society of Jordan, which I have just joined. And in fact, I was based at DPIR and the Oxford Martin School in Oxford for the past 3 years. So I just moved from Oxford to Amman. And I'm going to be introducing the issue of water scarcity in Jordan and the challenges around this. Yes, so the research issue is Jordan water scarcity, and the MENA region, in fact, is the most water scarce region in the world, and Jordan is the second most water scarce country in the world. Jordan's groundwater resources are decreasing in terms of quantity and quality due to over-extraction and overuse of these resources. In addition, 35% of Jordan's population is formed by refugees, and 90% of the food produced, the food consumed in Jordan is important, while about half of the water resources in Jordan go to agriculture. So I think those are important background information to bear in mind for this presentation and for this session on water in Jordan. And those are the reasons that pushed me to investigate the political economy of Jordan's water sector using discourses and the discourse of water scarcity as an entry point to better understand Jordan's political economy. The research aimed at better understanding the water problems and also to support, to improve the situation, so to drive towards a more sustainable use of the water resources of the country. So I mentioned the environmental degradation, in particular of the groundwater resources. However, it's also very, very visually clear, all this environmental degradation when it comes to the Jordan River, and in particular to the lower part of the Jordan River that flows into the Dead Sea. In fact, in this picture, in this map, we can see how the reduction of water resources impacted the Dead Sea, which is decreasing by 1 meter per year and has disappeared by about 1/3 of its original extension compared to about 100 years ago. 97% of the water flowing the Jordan River has decreased compared to the 30s, and also 50% decrease in biodiversity. So those are just a few numbers about the degradation, environmental degradation and challenges that Jordan is facing, which obviously are not simply due to biophysical issues, but also to some misgovernance and mismanagement in Jordan and in the region, given the transboundary nature of these challenges. Transboundary issues that I just mentioned are also very, very important when we look at surface water resources. In fact, about 40% of water resources in Jordan are shared with neighboring countries. In particular, we have 3 water bodies. One is the Yarmouk River in the north, where Jordan has an agreement with Syria and signed, the last one signed in 1987, river they share between Syria, Jordan, and Israel. And then we have the lower part of the Jordan River, which is shared between Jordan, Israel, and Palestine, the lower part, at least, of the Jordan River. And there is the treaty between Israel and Jordan, signed in 1994 as part of the peace treaty, which has an annex also on the water sector. And finally, we have the groundwater, non-renewable groundwater resource of the DC aquifer in the southern part of the country, shared between Jordan and Saudi Arabia, an agreement also here signed in 2015. So water resources in Jordan are obviously scarce, as we all know, but it's quite interesting to look at this slide to just have a broad idea of the water available in the country. And you can see that water resources, and those are data of 2017, it changed a little bit, but not too much. So water resources in 2017 were mainly surface water resources with 59%, while about 27% were groundwater resources and 14% treated wastewater, which is interesting when also, or actually the water supply first in the country. So while the water resources are the ones that I just mentioned, we can see that 54% of the water supply comes from groundwater resources, 33% from surface, and 13%, probably now a bit more, 15% from treated wastewater. And this is interesting, this discrepancy in data, because it shows that Jordan is over-relying on groundwater resources, mainly because they're mainly within the country and therefore not transboundary, and therefore it's easier to use, politically at least, because there's no need for agreements with neighboring countries, first reason. However, the other side of the story is that we are overusing these groundwater resources, so well beyond the safe yield, and therefore the recharge possibilities of these groundwater resources, which, as mentioned earlier, is resulting in a decrease in quality and quantity of these water resources. And then in the other slide, I mean, the other graph shows the water uses in 2017, and we can see that most of the water resources, 52%, is going for domestic use, about 45% for agriculture, and only 3% more or less for industry. So we can see that domestic uses and agricultural uses are very, very important for the water sector in Jordan. Agriculture, which was mentioned earlier, so 90% of the food consumed in the country is imported. However, we just saw that 50% more or less of water goes to agriculture. We can also see that the GDP contribution of agriculture to the country is only 3%. And also labor force from agriculture is only 3%. Obviously, those data are quite contested and controversial, because it really depends what we mean with agriculture. If you look at the whole production chain, then it would be much more of 3%, because it would also include some more from industry and services. So it's difficult to say. However, what I wanted to really understand is how is the discourse of water scarcity constructed in the case of Jordan. So I wanted to understand how the issue of water scarcity is spoken about and framed in Jordan. And for this reason, I analyzed written documentation, in particular media, newspaper articles, governmental reports, strategies of the government and ministries, policies, donors and international organizations reports, academic literature on water issues in Jordan, and also the textbooks, which I will mention later. I also followed up with semi-structured interviews to those producing these reports, and therefore framing this issue to understand why they frame the issues, emphasizing certain aspects rather than others, observation of how they speak about it, and also focus groups. And the main finding is that everyone, unsurprisingly, agrees that there is water scarcity in Jordan. However, they disagree on the nuances and on the emphasis on the different reasons causing water scarcity. We can see on the left that the more prominent one, the more influential and the more dominant narrative is the one that argues that there is water scarcity because we have limited water resources. And the follow-up, the solution that would follow this rationale is, given that we have limited water resources and they're not enough, we need to increase the water resources to be able to meet the demand. So that's more or less the rationale behind. But going deeper, we can see what are the reasons behind water insufficiency or limited water resources. And they emphasize four. The main one is population growth, immigration, and refugees. So they would argue that Jordan is water scarce because Jordan used to have a population of about less than 500,000 people when it was established back in 1946, and then it grows and grows and grows, especially due to people moving from abroad to Jordan, especially following international, regional instabilities and conflicts, with people moving to Jordan from Palestine, following the different wars, especially after the Nakba in 1948 and 67 and so on and so forth, but also from Lebanon, from Iraq, and more recently from Syria. So increasing the population, it also means that there's a growing need for water resources, both for drinking, but also for the different activities, as well as for food production. Then unfair sharing with neighboring countries. So there is unsurprisingly a perception that the water resources, especially the rivers that are shared with neighboring countries, Jordan is not getting the fair share, both on the Yarmouk River from the Syrians, but also on the Jordan River from the Israelis in particular. Then climate change is an additional pressure, so further reducing water resources in the country in different ways, as we all know. So like precipitation, changing patterns of precipitation, and therefore also recharge of groundwater resources, among others. And finally, aridity and low precipitation. So most of the territory in Jordan is arid or semi-arid, so it's quite unsurprising that we have water scarcity. Those reasons are mainly emphasized and put forward by the government, ministries, and actors and stakeholders aligned with the government. For instance, the Jordan Times, which is one of the main newspapers here in Jordan, quite aligned, obviously, with the government. And then we have another narrative, which I call the water mismanagement narrative, which basically argues we have water scarcity. However, it's mainly due to the mismanagement of such resources, which are already scarce. And therefore, firstly, we need, and that's the solution, the follow-up, we need to better use and better manage the water resources that we have. The main three reasons emphasized are non-revenue water due to leakages. So leakages and physical losses of the network, and then illegal wells and illegal uses, and so legal connection to the water network. And finally, the unsustainable agricultural water use. So we saw that agriculture uses 50% more or less of water and produces only 3% of the GDP. So maybe this should be rethought, they would argue. Obviously, it's quite more complex now, because agriculture is also important because it maintains and ensures rural development, and therefore the development of the rural areas, and therefore preventing migrations from rural areas to the capital, which already has half of the population, about 4 to 5 million people. So yeah, I mean, there's different aspects to consider. I mean, there's obviously no right solution. I mean, it's a very complex issue. But also just to mention that all people agree that all these 7 reasons are relevant and are to be solved and tackled. It's just a matter of emphasizing certain aspects and issues rather than others. And also to add, water mismanagement narrative is mainly put forward by actors that are mainly NGOs, some academics, international organizations, and donors. So that's the type of institutions that reproduce this aspect. And then for the solutions, as I was mentioning, are also divided by those put forward by one set of narrative and the other. So the first narrative, the water insufficiency, opens mainly project on increasing the water supply. So either a large project in the past was the Red Dead Canal, which is not a project anymore. It has been replaced by the Jordanian water carrier, which basically aims at desalinizing water in the southern part of the country in Aqaba, and then pumping the water up to the north of the part of the country where most of the population and most of the demand is, so 300 kilometers north, to provide water mainly for domestic use. And then the DC Canal project, so another infrastructural mega project, which is operational since 2015, 14-15. So pumping water from the south of Jordan, non-renewable groundwater to the north, and then treated wastewater, which is something that is supported by everyone. The other set of solutions instead opened by the water mismanagement emphasizes the need for tariffs and subsidies removal in agriculture in particular, efficiency in agriculture, especially regulations on the type of crops, having more crops that are using less water, and maybe, so like, for instance, less bananas, watermelons, and tomatoes, but more dates, for instance. And then tackling the non-revenue water, so leakages and closing the illegal wells. And there was a campaign about this. I know that I'm going ahead, I mean, over time, so I'll try to summarize. And then another solution, which is supported by both narratives, is the need for conservation, and therefore saving water, using less water, changing the behavior of people. with different initiatives. And maybe I will just move to I think one of the last slides, which is the one that probably is more interesting also for this session, that will probably be also further discussed by the other panelists, which is this slide on conservation of water and how we can try to shape behavior. And here there's three initiatives. One is the Water Journalism Academy. And so there's this NGO called CWAS in Jordan that has been working with others to engage media and journalists in Jordan to try to raise awareness on the water issues and try to get more newspapers to discuss and speak about water. Another one is the mosques, but I'm sure that there is another panel speaking only about this, so they will cover it. But maybe just to mention that together with the mosque, there was also an initiative to train and discuss with the religious leaders issues of water and religion, to ensure that in the weekly sermons these issues is mentioned, making clear and direct and explicit reference to Sharia and other hadith, for instance. And then finally, a study that I did on analyzing how water scarcity issues are discussed in textbooks. So how the textbooks in Jordan discuss and frame the issue of water, trying to change the behavior of students. And that's something that I'm also currently doing with Dr. Khulud, that I know she's speaking this afternoon, for the case of Palestine. That's it. I would just close here, and I'm happy to answer any question at the end of the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.